grand wedding hall fell silent. Gasps echoed through the golden-lit ballroom as the billionaire groom, Emeka Okafor, raised his hand and slapped his bride, Olivia, across the face. The sound cracked like thunder, cutting through the music playing in the background. Olivia staggered, her delicate white veil slipping from her perfectly styled hair. The guests, dressed in their finest, sat frozen in shock. The priest's hand trembled, clutching the sacred book, his mouth opening but no words coming out. No one could believe what they had just witnessed. And then, before anyone could react, Olivia did something that no one saw coming. Just moments ago, the wedding had been the picture of perfection. The venue was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like diamonds, and the floral arrangements alone were rumored to cost millions. The hall, filled with the scent of fresh roses and vanilla candles, sparkled under golden lights. It was an event straight out of a dream, a ceremony meant to be remembered for its beauty and elegance. Emeka, known for his ruthless business empire, had spared no expense. The Okafor family name carried weight in the business world, and his wedding was expected to be nothing short of extravagant. Olivia, a former schoolteacher with a kind heart, had captured the attention of the nation. Many had questioned how a woman so pure could fall for a man so powerful, but to the world, their love story had seemed like a fairy tale. The guests, celebrities, business tycoons, and even politicians had all gathered to witness what was supposed to be the wedding of the century. Everything had been going smoothly. The vows were exchanged, Olivia's voice soft but steady. Her eyes shone with love, or perhaps the illusion of it. The press had gone wild when she walked down the Isley in her designer gown, custom made in Paris, the lace hugging her slender frame with perfection. The cameras flashed, capturing what they thought was an iconic love story. Emeka had spoken his lines with a smirk, his tone confident, almost arrogant. He stood tall, exuding power, his tailored suit clinging to his well-built frame. To everyone, he was the ultimate catch, a man with wealth, power, and status. But behind that smooth exterior hid something dark. Then came the moment to seal their union with a kiss. Olivia leaned in, her lips parted slightly, ready to meet her husband's. But Emeka's face hardened. His fingers moved at his sides as he glared at her, with a look of cold anger. Without warning, his hand lashed out. The slap landed with a force that made even the security guards at the door jumped. The sound was deafening in the silent room, like a gunshot piercing through the celebration. Olivia stumbled backward, clutching her cheek as the sting from the slap spread through her face. A collective gasp erupted from the guests, some even rising from their seats in shock. The murmurs began almost immediately, whispers swirling like a storm around the grand hall. No one knew what had triggered it. Had Olivia whispered something? Had she done something to anger him? The moment was a mystery, but the damage was done. The hall was frozen in time. Olivia slowly lifted her head, her cheek burning, her eyes locked on Emeka's. Her lips trembled, but not from fear. There was something else in her expression. Something fierce. The entire hall watched, breathless, expecting her to break down, to cry, to flee, but she did none of those things. Instead, she took a deep breath, her fingers brushing over the microphone resting on the podium. She picked it up, her grip firm, her posture unshaken. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice ringing clear, "I think it's time for a little truth." The crowd leaned in, their curiosity overpowering their initial shock. Emeka's face paled. Something dark moved in his eyes. Fear, anger, a secret being dragged into the light. Whatever it was, the world was about to witness something far more shocking than a slap. The whispers in the crowd grew louder. Some guests exchanged glances, unsure of what was about to happen. Others pulled out their phones, already recording, eager to capture every moment of this unfolding drama. The tension was thick, suffocating. Emeka's yow tightened, his fists also tightening at his sides. He opened his mouth, perhaps to command Olivia to stop, but she raised a hand, silencing him without a word. She turned her gaze to the audience, scanning the faces of those who had come to celebrate her supposed joy. The elites, the socialites, the powerful men and women who thrived on scandal. They were waiting, anticipating what would happen next. Would she expose a secret? Would she walk away? Would she retaliate? Olivia's voice remained calm, but there was a dangerous edge to it. "Many of you came here today believing you were witnessing the happiest day of my life," she continued, her fingers touching her bruised cheek. "But let me ask you all something. What kind of man lays his hands on his bride on the day of their wedding?" The room erupted into hushed murmurs. Some guests shook their heads, apple-led. Others remained silent, unwilling to speak against a man as powerful as Emeka. The media personnel in the room clutched their cameras, already sensing that this moment would make headlines for weeks to come. Emeka stepped forward, his face covered with barely restrained fury. "Olivia, enough," he barked. "You're embarrassing yourself." Olivia let out a bitter laugh. "Am I? Or are you just afraid that the world will finally see the real you?" A visible murmur ran through the crowd. Emeka's grip on his control was slipping, and everyone could see it. His carefully crafted image, the polished businessman, the desirable bachelor, was beginning to crack, and Olivia wasn't done yet. "You see, Emeka," she said, taking a step closer to him, "you might have thought I would stand here and take your abuse quietly. You thought I would shrink and pretend like nothing happened, but you underestimated me." Emeka's eyes darkened, his breathing uneven. "Olivia, don't do this." His voice was low now, almost a warning. Olivia turned back to the audience, her expression unreadable. "The truth is," she began, but before she could finish her sentence, a loud commotion broke out at the entrance of the hall. All heads turned as a woman, dressed in a simple but elegant gown, pushed past the security guards and stormed into the room. Her face was red with anger, her eyes blazing as she pointed directly at Emeka. "You liar," she screamed. "Tell them the truth, Emeka. Tell them what you did." Gasps filled the room once more. Olivia tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. She had expected a reaction from Emeka, but this was something new. Emeka's face drained of color. The room, once again, fell into silence. Olivia smiled ever so slightly. "Now this," she whispered into the microphone, "just got interesting." The woman's voice trembled with fury as she marched forward. The security guards hesitated, glancing at Emeka for orders, but he stood frozen, his face drained of its usual arrogance. Olivia turned to the stranger, her eyes narrowing slightly. Who was she? And what did she know? The crowd stirred. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Some guests were already recording, eager to capture the scandal unraveling before them. "Who is she?" a voice whispered. "What's happening?" another asked. "Emeka." The woman's voice cut through the noise. "You thought you could hide this forever. Tell them the truth, or I will." Gasps erupted across the hall. Olivia's heart pounded as she turned to fully face the woman. Her eyes were filled with fire, her breathing uneven, her hands clenched into fists. She was young, perhaps in her mid-20s, dressed in a deep green gown that, while elegant, was nowhere near the extravagance of the other guests. But it wasn't her clothes that caught Olivia's attention. It was her face. There was pain there, deep pain, the kind that only betrayal could bring. Emeka finally moved. He took a step forward, his usually steady hands trembling slightly. "Adanna," he said through gritted teeth. "Leave. Now." The name sent a signal through the audience. More whispers followed, speculation growing like wildfire. Olivia's mind raced. Adanna? That name sounded familiar. Hadn't she heard it before? Somewhere in hushed tones, in messages Emeka had hastily deleted. She had dismissed it back then, thinking nothing of it. But now, standing before her, was living proof that she should have paid closer attention. Adanna's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Oh, so you do remember me. That's funny, considering you were willing to throw me away like trash the moment she came along." She pointed at Olivia. "Tell her the truth, Emeka. Tell her what you did to me." Olivia stiffened. The room felt like it was spinning. She turned to Emeka, her pulse hammering in her ears. "What is she talking about?" she demanded. Emeka exhaled sharply, his jaw tightening. "It's nothing. She's just trying to ruin this day. Security, remove her." Adanna laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Oh, You wish it were that easy, don't you? But you can't silence me anymore, Emeka. Not after what you did. Olivia watched as Emeka's carefully constructed image continued to crumble. The powerful, untouchable billionaire was suddenly looking very much like a cornered animal. And it terrified her. What was he hiding? What had he done? Adanna. Olivia's voice was steady, but her hands clenched at her sides. If you have something to say it now. Adanna's eyes met Olivia's. He promised me the world, just like he did to you. He swore he loved me. And then he destroyed my life. Silence. A suffocating silence that wrapped around the hall like a noose. Olivia's breath paused. Destroyed your life? How? Adanna swallowed hard. Because I carried his child. And he made sure that neither I nor that baby would ever be a problem for him again. A collective gasp filled the hall. Cameras flashed. Olivia felt her knees go weak. And Emeka? He finally looked afraid. The room had never been quieter. Every eye was on Emeka, waiting. Olivia took a step back, as if distance would protect her from whatever truth was about to come out. Adanna stood firm, her gaze burning with anger and pain. Emeka clenched his jaw, his breathing heavy. The once mighty billionaire, who commanded respect in every boardroom, now looked like a man trapped with no escape. Tell them, Emeka. Adanna pressed on, stepping closer. Tell your bride what you did to me. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest. Did to you? She repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. What is she talking about, Emeka? The guests murmured in confusion, some leaning forward in their seats, desperate for more. Journalists who had been invited solely to document the glamorous wedding had their cameras rolling, capturing every second of the drama. The story that was unfolding was no longer about love. It was about betrayal, secrets, and a scandal that would shake the entire country. Emeka exhaled sharply. She's lying, he said, his voice laced with frustration. She just wants to ruin our wedding, Olivia. Adanna let out a bitter laugh. Lying? You want to call me a liar in front of everyone? Fine, I will tell them everything. You forced me to leave the country. You made me disappear, Emeka. Do you remember how you handled it? Do you remember how you ruined my life? Olivia's stomach twisted. She had seen Emeka angry before. She had seen him be ruthless in business. But this was different. He was nervous, genuinely nervous. I don't know what you're talking about, Emeka muttered, but his voice lacked the usual confidence. Adanna turned to the audience, her voice shaking with emotion. 3 years ago, Emeka and I were together. He promised to marry me. He told me I was the only one. And then I got pregnant. The hall erupted in gasps. Olivia felt her legs weaken. She reached out, gripping the nearest chair for support. Adanna continued. He panicked. He said I would ruin his image, that I was a mistake. He told me to get rid of it, but I refused. I was ready to raise my child, even if it meant doing it alone. Her voice cracked, her eyes welling with unshed tears. That's when he decided to handle things his way. Olivia could barely breathe. What? What did he do? Adanna's hands trembled as she wiped at her eyes. One night, I was dragged out of my apartment by his men. I was put on a plane and sent away with a warning never to return. And while I was gone, something happened. She paused, her voice breaking. I lost my baby. Silence filled the hall. It was the kind of silence that suffocated, heavy with unspoken words and shock. Olivia's hands flew to her mouth, tears blurring her vision. Emeka remained still, his face unreadable, but his knuckles were white from how tightly his fists clenched. You killed my child, Emeka, Adanna said, her voice a whisper now. You took everything from me. The weight of her words crushed the air out of the room. The guests, once eager for a celebration, now sat paralyzed with horror. Some looked away, unable to meet Adanna's gaze. Others simply stared at Emeka, waiting for him to deny it, to defend himself. But he said nothing. Olivia felt like she was drowning. The man she had just married, the man she thought she knew, had done something so cruel, so heartless. She had heard rumors before, whispers of his cold-blooded tactics in business. But this? This was something else entirely. This was monstrous. Her fingers trembled as she reached up, touching the spot on her cheek where he had slapped her. That slap was the first glimpse of the real Emeka. And now she knew exactly what kind of man she had married. She took a shaky breath and turned to the guests. The cameras were still rolling. This was no longer just a wedding. It was a public reckoning. She had a choice to make. Would she stay silent, let this man control her like he had controlled others? Or would she fight back? The answer came to her in an instant. Olivia lifted her microphone, her hand steady, her voice clear. This wedding is over. The crowd erupted in gasps once more. Olivia turned to Emeka, her eyes blazing with fury. I will not spend another second by your side. I will not be your wife. You are a liar, a monster, and I refuse to be another one of your victims. Emeka's expression darkened. Olivia, don't do this. I already have. She turned to the priest. This marriage is void. I am not his wife. The guests watched, mesmerized, as Olivia removed her wedding ring and threw it to the ground. It rolled, stopping at Emeka's feet. The cameras captured every moment, every emotion. The story that would dominate the headlines for months had just been born. Olivia's declaration sent a ripple of chaos through the grand wedding hall. The guests erupted in murmurs, shockwaves of disbelief crashing through the lavish event. Some people gasped, others whispered, and a few had their phones raised, capturing every second of the scandal that was unfolding. The fairy tale wedding had transformed into a public spectacle, a nightmare unraveling in real time. Emeka's face twisted in fury. Olivia, think carefully about what you're saying, he warned, his voice low and dangerous. But Olivia didn't flinch. She had already made up her mind. The slap had been the final push, shattering the illusion of the man she had once loved. And now, with Adana's revelation about the past, she could see clearly Emeka was not just a cruel man, he was a monster. Adana stepped closer. She's done thinking, Emeka, she spat. Your time is up. Security guards hesitated, unsure of whose orders to follow. The once elaborate wedding ceremony had turned into an all-out confrontation, one that no one had been prepared for. Even the priest stood frozen in place, unable to comprehend how a sacred union had turned into an explosive scandal within moments. Olivia's mother, sitting near the front, stood up, clutched her chest. Olivia, my daughter, what is happening? She asked, her voice shaking. But Olivia could not answer her mother's cries. She was focused on the man she had almost given her life to. Emeka took a step forward, his jaw clenched. Olivia, he growled, his voice laced with restrained rage. You will regret this. Olivia straightened her shoulders. I already regret saying yes to you. The hall filled with gasps again. No one had ever spoken to Emeka Okafor like that. Not his business rivals, not his employees, and certainly not a woman. His reputation had been built on fear and control, but in that moment, he was losing both. And then, another voice cut through the chaos. Actually, it is over. A deep voice boomed from the entrance. Heads turned as yet another unexpected figure walked in. A man dressed in a crisp navy blue suit, flanked by two uniformed police officers. Emeka's face pallid instantly. The guests gasped, their whispers growing louder. Mr. Emeka Okafor, the man continued, his voice firm. You are under arrest. A stunned silence followed. What? Emeka barked, his voice rising in panic. Arrest for what? The suited man stepped closer, holding up a file. For multiple financial crimes, including fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. We have been investigating you for months, and recent evidence has confirmed everything. Your empire is built on stolen wealth, Mr. Okafor, and today, justice catches up with you. Emeka's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape, but there was none. The guests had parted like the Red Sea, leaving him standing alone in the middle of the hall. The cameras were still rolling. The entire country was watching. His carefully curated reputation was crumbling before his eyes. This is ridiculous, Emeka roared. I demand to speak to my lawyer. You can do that at the station. The officer beside him said coldly, "Now, turn around and put your hands where we can see them." Olivia watched, her heart pounding, as Emeka hesitated. Would he fight? Would he try to run? His pride wouldn't let him surrender easily. Then, suddenly, he lunged forward. A collective scream filled the hall as Emeka grabbed Olivia's wrist, pulling her toward him. "You think you can humiliate me?" he snarled. "You think you can do this to me?" Olivia struggled, fear flashing in her eyes, but before Emeka could tighten his grip, a loud smack rang through the hall. Adanna had slapped him. The force of the slap stunned him just enough for the officers to seize him, pulling him away from Olivia. The entire room stood frozen in shock. Adanna's eyes burned with fury. "That's for my baby," she hissed. Emeka struggled, but the officers overpowered him, forcing his hands behind his back. The sound of handcuffs clicking into place was like a final nail in the coffin. Olivia rubbed her wrist where Emeka had grabbed her, her eyes locked onto his. "I hope you rot in prison." The officers began leading Emeka out. As they reached the door, he twisted his head back, his voice echoing through the hall. "This isn't over, Olivia. You'll regret this." But she only lifted her chin. "No, Emeka. For the first time in my life, I have no regrets." The doors slammed shut behind them, and with that, the nightmare was over. Or so they thought. Just as the tension in the hall began to ease, one of the guests stood up suddenly, a grim expression on his face. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through something before looking up. "You need to see this," he said, holding up the screen. "There's more." The guests crowded around, eyes widening as they saw the breaking news flashing across the screen. Billionaire Emeka Okafor's secret life exposed. Underground deals, hidden families, and more. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. More secrets? More lies? She looked over at Adanna, who was equally stunned. The breaking news flashed across the screen, sending another wave of shock through the hall. More secrets, more lies. Olivia's fingers trembled as she took the phone from the guest's hand and read the headline again. Billionaire Emeka Okafor's secret life exposed. Underground deals, hidden families, and more. Adanna gasped. Hidden families. The room erupted in whispers again. Olivia scrolled through the article, her heart pounding. The truth was worse than she had imagined. Emeka had not only deceived her, but had been living a double, no, triple life. There were two other women, both claiming to be his wives, both with children. He had kept them hidden, supporting them in secret, using stolen money to maintain his lies. Olivia turned to Adanna. "Did you know about this?" Adanna shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "I thought I was the only one." A new voice echoed through the hall. "He deceived us all." The doors swung open again, and in walked another woman. She held the hand of a little boy, no older than 6. The boy had Emeka's eyes. Gasps filled the air. "This is his son," the woman said, her voice steady. "And I am his real wife." Olivia's world spun. She had prepared for a fight, but this was beyond anything she had imagined. Murmurs turned into loud chatter as more people stepped forward, claiming to have been victims of Emeka's deception. His business partners, some of whom had been in attendance, now looked visibly uncomfortable. They had invested millions in his companies, believing him to be an honest businessman. But now, they realized they had been financing a criminal. The police officers who had been leading Emeka out paused as their radios crackled. More reports were coming in. Charges were stacking up against him. Bank accounts frozen. Properties seized. His empire was crumbling in real time. Olivia felt a mix of emotions: betrayal, anger, relief, but above all, freedom. She had been moments away from legally binding herself to a man who would have destroyed her life. She turned to the priest, who still stood near the altar, his face pale with shock. "Reverend," she said, her voice steady, "I believe this wedding is officially cancelled." The priest nodded, unable to find words. Some guests laughed nervously, others applauded. It was the most dramatic wedding anyone had ever witnessed. The journalists, who had been discreetly filming, knew they had just captured a story that would dominate headlines for weeks. Emeka, now handcuffed, walked back into the hall with armed police officers behind him, turned his head to Olivia. His expression was no longer one of arrogance or rage, it was fear. He had lost everything: his reputation, his power, his freedom. And the worst part? He had done it to himself. "You'll regret this," he hissed as the officers pulled him away. Olivia met his gaze with unwavering strength. "No, Emeka, I already told you that, for the first time in my life, I have no regrets." With that, the doors shut behind him again. He was gone. A deep breath escaped Olivia's lips. The nightmare was finally over, or so she thought. Just as the tension in the hall began to ease, a sharp voice rang out from the back of the room. "There's one more thing." All heads turned toward an elderly man in a dark grey suit. He had been quiet all along, watching everything unfold. Now, he stepped forward, a briefcase in hand. "I'm Chief Oyukwu," he announced, his deep voice commanding attention. "I was Emeka's father's closest business associate, and I had planned to come here with the truth, unaware that all what happened earlier was going to happen. An adage says, 'Every day for the thief, one day for the owner.'" Olivia tensed. "Another secret?" The old man's eyes swept over the guests before settling on her. "You deserve to know the full truth," he said, unlocking the briefcase and pulling out a thick file. Emeka Okafor was never meant to inherit his father's empire. A new wave of shock rippled through the room. "What do you mean?" Olivia asked, her voice a bit above a whisper. "Chief Oyukwu Sighed. Before his father passed, he left instructions in his will. He knew Emeka was not fit to run the company. The real heir was supposed to be his younger brother, but Emeka forged documents and manipulated people to take over." The guests gasped yet again. The story was unraveling deeper than anyone had expected. "The company's assets are now being reclaimed by the rightful owner," Chief Oyukwu continued. "Everything Emeka owned, including the wedding venue, is being seized." Olivia nearly laughed at the irony. Emeka had flaunted his wealth like a god, but in the end, it was never truly his. "What happens now?" she asked. Chief Oyukwu gave her a small nod. "You move forward. And as for Emeka, well, the courts will take care of him." A heavy silence followed, then a slow, growing sound. Applause. It started with a few guests, then more, until the entire hall erupted into cheers. People clapped for Olivia, for her courage, for standing up to a man who had deceived so many. Adonna stepped forward, placing a hand on Olivia's shoulder. "You're free now," she said softly. Olivia turned to the woman who had risked everything to expose the truth. "So are you." Tears glistened in both their eyes, but they were tears of victory. Just then, Olivia's mother rushed forward and pulled her into a tight embrace. "My daughter," she sobbed. "Thank God you are safe." Olivia held on to her mother, the weight of everything finally settling in. "Mama, I am safe, and I am strong." She pulled away, turning to the guests. "Thank you all for witnessing the truth," she said. This was supposed to be a wedding, but instead, it became a lesson. A lesson that no amount of money or power can hide the truth forever. The crowd nodded in agreement. Some had come expecting a glamorous wedding. They were leaving with a story they would never forget. Adonna linked arms with Olivia. "Come on," she said, smiling. "Let's go start our new lives." Olivia took one last look at the grand hall. The decorations, the chandeliers, the expensive floral arrangements, all of it had meant nothing in the end. True wealth wasn't in money or status. It was in freedom, in truth, in the people who stood by you when the world crumbled. With her head held high, she turned and walked out of the hall, stepping into the sunlight of a brand new beginning. The fairy tale had ended. But for Olivia, the real story was just beginning.